This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, you just have to give it a second, not click too fast. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our monthly K-12 STEM Outreach Community of Interest call. Eddie's not going to be with us today, so it's going to be my first time trying to drive the slides. So bear with me, and we'll get going. Here's the agenda for the day. I have a few opening remarks, some information to pass along, and then we have Chris Rocheleau, did I say that right? From the FAA, who's going to tell us about their STEM outreach program. And then just a couple tips. We've been talking about virtual events. A couple of things I wanted to pass along from some recent experiences of mine. And then we'll kind of do an around the room if anyone has any questions or comments for the good of the group. So anyway, welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate everyone tuning in. And I want to thank Chris Rocheleau. I apologize, Chris. I didn't ask you how to say your name. From the FAA for being for being here. Real excited to see what he's got to tell us. But first, some news from the K-12 STEM community of interest. Very good news here. Liza Gruden, our Vice Chair for Strategic Alliances Extraordinaire, has been selected as the new K-12 Outreach Community of Interest Chair. She's going to take my spot next month at the change of leadership at the National Board of Direction meeting. Josh Graham is going to be the chair-elect to follow her. At this point, I am thinking about taking Liza's role as the Strategic Alliance Vice Chair, because that was one of my things, one of my commitments as a fellow was to try to bring in more strategic alliances and work with other organizations. But if one of you guys out there wants to jump in and help out, I am more than happy. I'm all about sharing the work, spreading the wealth. And even if you don't want to do anything in particular, one thing that I'm interested in is always having more names, more faces, more ideas, fresh faces on our leadership team. You don't have to have a specific role. You don't have to have a title. If you'll just want to call into our monthly leadership team calls and give us your opinion, listen to what we're discussing, that's always appreciated. Of course, a month from now, Liza can just undo everything I just did, but no, I'm just kidding. Also, I'm going to send out a Survey Monkey here in the next week or two. It occurred to me I probably should have sent that out at the end of the first year of our existence, and kind of use that as a chance to redirect or steer. But at this point, I would like to see how you guys feel things have been going, what we could be doing better, and have some good information to hand off to Liza as she starts her term as our chair. So if you've liked what we're doing, if you think we're doing some good stuff, be brutally honest, tell us how much you like it. If there's things that we should have been doing better, be honest, just don't be so brutal, okay? Liza, would you like to introduce our guest presenter?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Chris is our Deputy Assistant Administrator for Policy, International Affairs, and Environment at the FAA. His career extends over 20 years with that department. Previously, he was the Executive Director for International Affairs, where he developed international policy and provided guidance across the various disciplines of the FAA. In this capacity, he was also responsible for the FAA's international offices in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. His current role, he helps lead and develop the FAA's international strategic planning and policies, environment and energy policies, and aviation activity forecasts and economic analysis. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to speak with us, Chris.
Thank you, Liza, and thank you, Jeff. Can everybody hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up or something?
Yes,
Good.
you're
Thank
good.
you. Great. Well, well, thank you for the introduction. I wasn't expecting that, so appreciate it. I am Chris Rocheleau, and I do work for the FAA, and true to form, I'm practicing what I preach, and I'm traveling in the system today. So I'm sitting here just flown in from Washington National, and I'm at Tampa International Airport, here to actually spend a couple of days with my folks, as I'm trying to use the system, but at the same time find moments of relaxation. And I hope everyone here today is doing well and coping with all the many things we're coping with these days. So Eddie, Jeff, and Liza asked that I come and talk a little bit today about kind of what we're doing at the FAA with respect to STEM and what we call AVSED, or Aviation and Space Education efforts. You heard a little bit about my background. Again, I've been around for a while now and have been very active in both our leadership development programs as well as the STEM and AVSED programs, bringing in new people to our aviation or aerospace pipeline. So I've got about 10 minutes a slide. I invite questions because some of this is probably new to some of you and some of this may be just routine, but happy to answer any questions as we go along here or at the end, either way. So next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. So the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, does three primary things for our nation and quite honestly impacting and influencing the world. First off, we operate. So a lot of people don't understand or maybe recognize that there's a incredibly complex system, both on the ground and in the sky, that moves millions of people around the world, and obviously, particularly here in the United States, every day in a extremely safe and efficient manner. And if you take a look at the quick slide there on the bottom left, you'll see just a snapshot of March of 2020 of the number of airplanes over the United States of America. And we're monitoring and controlling all of that through our command center, which is just the, looks like an operations center just above that. Obviously, there's a lot of aircraft in the sky. So we have your traditional, United airline flight, which I came in on today. In addition to the mom and pop flying their Cessna 172, we've got SpaceX breaking new ground and launching commercial air traffic every day, which requires quite a bit of work for our air traffic controllers to kind of block that space and let that rocket go up safely. We're constantly working now on drones, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in a second. And of course, we're doing that with our air traffic control workforce, in addition to the maintainers and the safety experts that are on the ground. So we operate the nation's aerospace system each and every day, 24/7, 365. Next slide, please. The other thing, because there is this complex system above us and moving people all around our nation, we regulate. So we set rules for how to operate within the system itself, whether that's training pilots in very advanced technology kind of aircraft, the latest 787. Obviously, you probably have heard about the 737 MAX, which we just went through and did a lot of work on that. All the way from, teaching kids the basics of a Cessna 152 and how the airspace works and how the training goes into making sure that as we are growing people to enter the airspace, that they understand what they're dealing with. A lot of people call them highways in the sky, and if it were only that simple, it would be nice, but it is an extremely complex system, particularly as we look at drones, our unmanned aircraft that we're bringing into the system now. You can see just a couple shots there. We've got a very active program, a pilot program in multiple states that allow for the delivery of food. Virginia Tech, where my oldest daughter goes, Christiansburg actually, just next to VT, is operating delivery of burritos and other kinds of things. And we want to make sure when those drones operate that they're doing safely over people and beyond line of sight is what we call it. In addition, you'll see there in the top right pictures of surveyors or people that are doing inspections of power lines. Those are much more complex, and those are the kind of dangerous and dirty jobs that drones offer people the opportunity to use in the conduct of their business, but at the same time making sure that they're doing so in an extremely safe manner. And of course, we have the more traditional approach with regard to how the rules are set, and that is specific to our aviation safety workforce. People that are obviously doing inspections on aircraft, people that are checking pilots to make sure they're safe, and setting up the rules for operation, both on the ground as well as in the sky. So the third thing we do, next slide, please, is provide grants. I'll keep talking while we pull the slide back up. But so the FAA has about 3.5, and this past year it's been particularly noticeable. We've received another $1.5 billion to provide grants to airports in local communities around the states to ensure that whatever they're setting up there and locally, obviously as a state or international airport, that they're doing so safely. So there, our money, our grants go to airports to ensure that our national network of airports are in fact connected and operating in the same safe manner. You can see just a few shots here. We provide, as I was preparing the presentation, my wife asked me about what's with the fire truck, and so we do provide money for fire trucks and in other kinds of airfield rescue facilities and the like, to make sure that if something happens in an airport, that the airports are in fact safe. We also do a lot of design work, a lot of airfield management work, whether that's using architects to revamp airports or just set up brand new ones from, and you don't see a lot these days with just fresh ground, but both of those. And of course, you have very advanced electronic systems that help aircraft land and take off, whether it's lighting systems or GPS and the like. So we use a complex array of technology to ensure that as planes come and go, whether that's the big boys like an Airbus, or something small like a business jet, or all the way down to the smaller personal aircraft, you'll see us kind of working closely with airports to make sure that as they operate, that they're doing so safely. Next slide, please. One of the things that kind of supports these focus areas, so the operation of the airspace system, the regulation of that system, and of course, the funding to support systems as they're built out, we focus largely on looking to the future. So I would confess to you, about 10 years ago, we were caught a little aback by the explosion, if you will, of unmanned aircraft. So that was one of those wake-up calls where we always kind of knew they were there, but we, like most people, either viewed them as toys or viewed them as something that the military was using for the most part. But over time, obviously, we recognize they're much more capable, they're much more advantageous to the society as a whole. And so we started really looking at kind of how we're doing that. We'd always look to some degree to the future of our air traffic controllers, our safety engineers on the ground, and some of the other disciplines we look to support, but we really kind of got caught a little aback by the massive move on technology. In fact, one of our administrators used to like to say that we likely will never operate at the speed of Silicon Valley, but we have to stop operating at the speed of government. And so that was one of the things that we really took on. So we look at the future, and we look to make sure that as we're developing the future, that we're considering the needs of the system itself, the pilots, the mechanics, the engineers, the air traffic controllers, even commercial astronauts, quite honestly. That is something that we had looked at before as largely a military or a NASA thing. And now, of course, we've got commercial astronauts, and they've already been receiving their wings, so to speak. So we're always looking kind of to the future and what things are coming and how we're going to need to grapple with that. Next slide, please. One of the reasons that we've got to look to the future is because there's an ebb and flow, as there are most things, But certainly Boeing did a study back in 2019 and issued it in 2020. And this is kind of, as you look at the aerospace system, this is the challenges that we're looking at going forward. So commercial airline pilots, about 200,000 we're going to need in the next 20 years, maintenance technicians, unmanned aircraft pilots and operators, and of course others. And that's where I'll spend just a second there on the others, because that is particularly, I think, more applicable to what we're talking about here today with respect to engineering. And when we're talking about engineering, again, it runs the gamut. We're talking about civil engineers. We're talking about environmental engineers. I've got 7 or 8 just on my staff right now working through some of the sustainable fuels that we're working on, the noise in certain communities. And so civil, environmental, mechanical, I mentioned before about technology. We're really starting to wrestle with how do we get more computer engineers on our staff, simply because there's a need for that, and we are one player, and not everyone knows about the FAA. Unless you're getting in a plane and hear the announcement about putting your seatbelt on, it doesn't come to mind necessarily first up for many people. And so part of our job is to get out there and really get the word out about our need for engineers, pilots, controllers, etc. And the reason we're doing that is because there is going to be a severe shortage that will press the system itself. And our goal at the end of the day in all of our activities is to make sure that airspace above us is safe. It's safe both here domestically, but also particularly for my focus area is internationally. So our goal being anywhere America travels, anywhere in the world, they can count a system that's just safe overseas as it is here in the domestic U.S. So that is something we're constantly working at, and that's why we're working on developing this aviation workforce going forward. Next slide, please. So to be able to answer the need, so to speak, you got to have a plan. And one of the ways we developed a plan was we started with principles. So we started with principles around how are we going to go out and reach to aerospace professionals, future aerospace professionals going forward. And one of the ways we did that was we established these priorities or these objectives for our goals. In other words, to drive the strategic plan, what were the principles that we were going to rely on or lean on? The first up was to hire. There really are, and when I was an active duty Air Force officer for many years, didn't really understand the FAA. Then when I got to the FAA, I went, wow, there's a lot of cool things going on here. I personally have failed to get my daughters excited about the FAA. They say the FAA is boring. At the same time, there's so many things going on, whether you're a communications specialist, an air traffic controller, a safety engineer, and the like. So we want to inspire the youth, kindergarten through 12. We want to let them know there's exciting things going on with respect to aerospace. We want to educate them. We want to make sure that the information that they need to understand, both the teachers as well as the students get, it's out there, that it is interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of different platforms that we're working with these days. But to more or less make sure the information itself is out there, so we want to educate people. Next is the collaboration piece, which is quite honestly one of the most obvious things. We can't do it internal to the agency itself. There are plenty of other agencies and exciting places like SpaceX or Boeing and some of the like that are going out there and trying to recruit their own, but we want to collaborate there with them. So if in fact there is this passion for civil service and there is passion to help regulate, operate the system, that they come our way and they talk to us. And of course, I mentioned before about the improvement. We're constantly looking to improve the system, making sure that we're looking for both technology, but as well as professional skills to improve the safety of the system, because the system, there's just like real estate, there's only so much of it. And so you've got to make sure that you're operating it as efficiently as possible through technology and through people. So as we work to improve the system, we're using that as one of our guideposts for our strategic plan around workforce development and STEM AVSET. Next slide, please. So we developed a plan in 2020 to do additional, more focused outreach for STEM and AvSed. And you can see here our 4 primary goal areas are, in fact, to make sure that we're building the pipelines, that we're building the way to get to the FAA, and not necessarily just the FAA. There are the Boeings, the Uniteds, the Aerospace Industries Association. There are plenty of other avenues out there to help create those pipelines, but that is kind of our goal number 1, is create the pipelines themselves. Second goal, again, just like we talked about, I mentioned earlier, is to make sure that STEM education is out there and available for everyone. We want to make sure that every student, no matter what their race, ethnicity, education background, financial support, whatever that is, we want to make sure that's out there and people can kind of get to it when they need to, and that's working with schools as well as other entities. And that leads us to the goal number 3, which is strategic partnerships. Those have been critical for us for success, whether it's working with specific universities that specialize in aviation or with other partners that just have an interest in developing young people into aerospace. So obviously, Civil Air Patrol is one of the more obvious ones. There are plenty of boys and girls clubs out there that we've engaged with locally, regionally, to make sure that they're getting what they need, but also as the kids come into those avenues, that we make them aware of what we have to offer in terms of as an employer, but also something maybe even more excited about the industry itself. And then finally, our 4th goal is to make sure that we do as much cross collaboration as we have within the FAA itself. So the agency is a fairly large agency. As I mentioned, it's got 3 primary parts, but also a handful of others, including policy. We're in international affairs, which is what I work in, as well as security and some of the commercial space and the like. And so what we tried to do was take all the employees in the FAA, make sure they were ambassadors for reaching out through STEM and AvSed itself. And so right now we have about 1,700 volunteers. I'm one of those volunteers as an organizational rep. And I get out there and I kind of wave to people. We go to air shows and we talk to kids about aviation. We teach them about wings and airport layouts and counter drone technology and the things, just to see what we can do to excite them and snag them and obviously bring them closer to the aerospace way of doing business and the like. So I think, yeah, one more slide we've got there. And I feel like I've been talking for a while. I'm happy to answer any questions. One of our focus areas this year is around developing women and girls in aerospace. A lot of people don't know that the commercial airline pilots in the United States are represented by roughly 7% of them are women. And only 2% of women are aircraft mechanics or aviation mechanics. And so those are things that we're really working hard to develop. Every year, I mean, we obviously cover the gamut in terms of our recruitment and our outreach, but this year we're focused a little bit more around women and girls in aerospace, mainly because we see the numbers, they're not tracking well. We want to make sure that we're reaching out to women in diverse areas of our nation. We have received some direction from Congress, which is always helpful, to set up the Federal Advisory Committee that you see there on the right. And there's 2 that we focused on: women in aviation, as well as youth access to American jobs in aviation. And those are 2 that we're working right now in partnership with kind of this overall effort that I'm talking about here today. The next way we're trying to do additional outreach is through social media. We have gotten so much better in the last 2 or 3 years with regard to social media, whether that's Instagram or Twitter, Facebook, and the like. I don't think we've made it to the TikTok yet, but we're probably going to get there at some point. It's just that social media, we find a lot more people kind of clicking on us and coming our way because of that, and it's really proved to be very helpful to us overall. And then the final area that we're working with is professional women in aviation. So the CEOs, the pilots, the astronauts, and we partner with them and we make sure that they get a chance to connect with the youth, the young women and girls to, as you see here, see her, be her, to give good examples and good role models to these young ladies that may have an interest in aviation. And so those are the kind of primary areas that we're working on right now. I understand that I've just kind of covered roughly 20 to 30 minutes for the material in about 10, 15, but I did want to give a chance to answer some questions. There are a lot of things we do in the FAA. We're a pretty large organization with some decent resources to do some of this, but clearly part of our work is the passion of our individual staff, and then of course outreach and in collaboration with other entities such as SAME or again, Civil Air Patrol, DOD, NASA, etc. So I will stop there. I again feel like I've been rambling, but I'm happy to take any questions about whether it's drones or air traffic controllers or airfield management. I have working knowledge of most everything we do. I also served as chief of staff for a while, so I got to see the show from the 30,000 foot level and got to see it all, but happy to entertain anything you got. And since this is my first go-to, I'm going to let somebody else handle any questions or unmuting or the like. So, Jeff?
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for a great presentation. So we're a small enough group. I'm not going to make people or put their questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself as you have a question. I'll start off with a couple here that I have. You were talking about the drones and had the picture of the drones delivering pizza. Obviously, for that to be effective, it needs to be out of line of sight. Otherwise, you might as well drive it. If you have to go to, line of sight of where you're delivering it. So, is that done with GPS or coordinates and how restrictive are the rules? Is that only in certain communities that they can do that?
The answer is yes. It's largely using GPS technology that is built into the system itself, and there are probably about a dozen, 10 to 12. I'm not sure how many are active right here today, but certainly Christiansburg continues to operate deliveries. One of the things, and so they do use GPS, and obviously it's a fairly controlled environment. There could be a Wild West if we let that happen, but we will not let that happen simply because there's just too much risk of having heavy, large things up in the sky. So we're working through it. We're doing a crawl, walk, run approach. Drone delivery is definitely a big deal. I would say that even more advanced is the inspections and the bridge inspections, the power lines, what we call dirty, dangerous jobs. A lot of people are using them for those these days, but delivery is on its way. And I got news for you. One of the things we are just setting up in about, I think it's next month actually, is advanced air mobility. So you've heard of like Uber drones, where you go from one of the ways they're talking about it is now is to go from downtown DC out to Dulles in a drone, where you just go to a local, I'll call it helipad, but it's going to be a drone pad. You pick it up, you get in, and you and your best friend hit Dulles, and it takes you there in about 20 minutes, which is pretty good time going from downtown DC to Dulles. So the bottom line is drones are on their way. We're looking many different ways to enable that. But again, it's a crawl, walk, run approach, just because the last thing that we, as well as the drone industry, want to do is have some fatal event or some just really significant accident that will set the industry behind.
There's a limitation on the number of licenses or participants that can be doing drone delivery in a given area, or because you're not limiting airspace, so are you limiting the number of participants, or?
Well, there is a system, and we actually have it. Believe it or not, there's an app for that. So we have a couple of ways to manage that. It's for real. I actually have it on my phone because I fly them myself. Now for delivery, so for commercial purposes, there are certain rules that have to go into place. You have to understand, and there's an airspace. You have to do so any commercial purpose delivery, photography. There's a lot of real estate houses that are using this now for photography, videography, and the like. So, but yes, at the end of the day, it all needs to be deconflicted in a certain box of airspace, if you will. And so there's certain altitude thresholds. There are certain, operating rules. There are systems coming online that will allow for deconfliction in the airspace, so live, active. But again, those are pretty limited right now, simply because of the safety aspects.
So the 4 goals that you mentioned, I have one more question here. You
Sure.
talked about the pathways and pipelines, and that's certainly a phrase that we use between our K-12 and our college outreach and our young members and our young professionals and our leader development program. We look at that as a pipeline starting from K through, getting your professional licensure as an engineer or a scientist or architect. And then you talked about STEM education, and we try to help facilitate that STEM education, science fair judges and career day speakers and those kind of things. And then of course strategic partners, or what we're calling strategic alliance here, and the collaboration. So do you have educational programs or materials? I'm trying to take your goal number 2 of STEM education and your goal number 3 of strategic partnership and figure out where SAME and you work together, how we support each other a little more specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have education packages, and to answer the question that came in on the chat, I would share that we don't have an FAA camp for kindergarten through 12 just yet. What we do is we partner with the Civil Air Patrol. We go to air shows and do seminars or talks, or we do with the Boy Scouts, we'll do airplane building and the like. So we do have a lot of that outreach. If you go to the next slide, which I didn't ask you to do, but since you prompted the question, I'm going to go ahead and give you our point of contact, Chris Sharp. She is kind of the manager for the Aviation Workforce and Education Division. She's phenomenal. Young, bright, understands all the new technology, but been around long enough to really understand the agency. And she is a great point of contact to get the materials that we're talking about or set up the partnerships that may be interested in. For instance, I'm familiar with the SME camps, and to have one of our outreach representatives come out and do a presentation, obviously not quite this technical, but maybe something a little more fun or interactive. We offer those opportunities too, and we have 9 regional offices around the U.S. that partner with local and state officials to do that.
That would be great. I know out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, they have something they call Air Camp. I have no idea. As long as I've been here, I haven't been involved in that. But I'm anxious to get involved. The year I was going to get involved was the pandemic, and so nothing's happened for over a year. So I'm hoping that here in 2021 things open back up and I get a chance to get involved. But I'm curious as to what that is, and I think having your materials available and or one of your volunteers be able to come out either to one of our construction camps, or certainly we have enough STEM events in and around affiliated with the base, or even a lot of our local school systems will put on a STEM day or a STEM evening. We have something here in the Dayton area called Tech Fest, which is 2 days with 70 different presenters and booths and shows and things. So I'm hoping that some of our other posts have access or are trying to come up with some ideas that way to do some of their STEM outreach. I see another question in the chat. If you live in a city with a small to medium airport, whom do we call to ask for a guest speaker? Is that Chris, or is there?
So I would definitely start with Chris. However, Chris has kind of the network that's set up. So if you're in a smaller city, obviously if you've got an airport, then you've got an FAA person close by at some point. Maybe not some of the more remote areas, but even then we've got people assigned to those airports. So, but in a smaller city, I would definitely reach out to Chris. Between the materials and points of contact for a local camp or something along those lines, she's able to kind of do some magic and get someone there. We have, in the larger cities, we obviously have a larger presence of regional administrators and flight standards, people who are safety experts that can come out and do this. And as I mentioned earlier, we have about 1,700 people that volunteer to do this nationwide. So we ought to be able to get someone for you to come out and support some of the camps as you develop them. We're still working through the COVID in summer and what that's going to look like. The air shows right now, where we've got one in Florida at the beginning of next month, where we're not going to send kind of our troops out to do some of the things. We're going to leave just the safety professionals to focus on the air traffic and the inspections of the aircraft. But we're thinking Oshkosh is a big thing for us. It's a big air show, national air show, that we show up in force. We do a huge event in a hangar there for the kids. We're hoping to pull something perhaps hybrid off this year, but it's still a little too early.
Excellent, excellent. Any other questions out there? Either put them in the chat or feel free to unmute your microphone and speak up.
Is the slides available?
Say again?
Sorry,
Are the slides available from, you just?
Yeah, please feel free.
Yeah, so I have them there. It's actually a PDF, so it's easy enough to email out after this call. Of course, we recorded the call if you know someone who wants to come back on and revisit it. But after the call, I'm going to do a little summary email and email out the slides and a little description of what we talked about. So who was that asked?
My name is Matt.
Oh, okay, Matt, see ya. Yeah, sorry, I didn't catch your name fast enough. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we'll send out the slides. That'd be great. And that way you'll have the links and the contact information and whatnot. Anything else from anybody?
Hi, this is Sheila Newman.
Hi, Sheila.
Hey, so I just wanted to find out, and you may have mentioned this, but what have you seen as your success rate when you've done this? Have you kind of tracked your success rate about having these types of involvement and then following through to see, you know, what has happened with those students and their education?
So I am unprepared in the moment to tell you about the kindergarten through 12 because it's a fairly new outreach effort for us just in the past couple of years. I know that we have, again, Chris, and there's 2 or 3 other people that work the program. They've tracked some of our college efforts. So for the longest time, we've been very active with the Embry-Riddles and the Vaughn colleges and the historically Black colleges, so we focused largely on the colleges, but we're realizing now, and again, it's an epiphany for us in the past few years, where we just aren't getting that pipeline. We used to depend a lot on the military, but the military is not training the people or putting out the people that they used to for us. We're the beneficiaries of a lot of that, and we're not getting that. So the short answer is I don't have the stats. I know that we've been particularly successful in some of the efforts on the college age students. I don't have a stat for you though for kindergarten through 12th grade, but it is fairly new. So I know they've got some statistics in terms of outreach numbers. I don't know what that translates to in terms of whether it's young ladies or young engineers and the like coming our way. I just don't. Sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anyone else? So I think you see in the chat, Eddie mentioned we'll post the slides along with the recording of this meeting on the website that you can download as well. So Chris, I want to thank you very much for your time and your great presentation. And I think, you know, we made the change a couple years ago ourselves to separate our college outreach and our K-12 outreach as needing a little bit different focus, where the K-12 is kind of reaching out to all students and introducing them to the concept of STEM and possible careers and that kind of thing. And college outreach, I don't want to say it's more of a supportive role, but in my mind, you're working with people who've already made that decision, let's say. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how the K-12 program for you guys grows, and it's a little harder to track there, but but I think that would be helpful. So thanks so much for your time. You're welcome to stay on. We're going to be on just a couple more minutes talking about a few things, but
Well, thank you, Jeff and Liza and Eddie. I appreciate the invitation today, and thanks to everyone for listening. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to Chris Sharp. She is kind of our master at this, but I'm also available if you're not getting something you need. Feel free to reach out. But thanks again for the time today, and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
great.
Thanks. Enjoy
Thanks, Chris.
Tampa.
Okay, so just a couple things I wanted to pass along. We talked last month about virtual science fair judging, and we've talked in previous months about virtual STEM outreach type of things, and I've done two different virtual STEM outreach things, and just a couple of tips or some do's and don'ts here as we go along. One of the presentations I did, the students were all in a classroom. I was on camera with my displays in front of me, but they had the lights off so they could see their big screen at the front of the classroom better. It was hard to see the kids. So you need to really set up in advance that the teacher is going to be a liaison for you. When you ask a question, she's going to have to call on the students. You're not going to be able to point to them, and you don't know their names. And likewise, if they're using a single camera with a microphone on either on their smart board or on her computer on her desk, you're not probably going to be able to hear them. She's going to have to repeat those questions back to you, and you may find it easier to use fewer open-ended questions where you're asking for a verbal response. One of the things that I do in that case is I give them a lot of this or that, yes or no, up or down. You know, if you think something, everybody raise your hand, and then okay, now how many people think the opposite or whatnot, and it goes a little faster. When you try to do open-ended questions, it gets to be very slow and cumbersome, which can be distracting for the students. Now, if you are, on the other hand, are doing a virtual presentation, much like we are here today, where everyone's on an individual screen, there are advantages and disadvantages to that as well. Okay, you need to ask a lot of questions because the teacher's not in the room with them to make sure they're engaged. If they turn their cameras off, if they decide they're going to take a nap, if they're laying on their bed staring at the ceiling, if they're all at home. So you want to ask them to keep their cameras on, or ask the teacher to have them keep their cameras on. That will kind of force them to pay a little bit more attention. The young lady who was using her iPhone and was in the bathroom and did at least 100 brush strokes through her hair while the meeting was going on. At least she had her phone with her. But plan to have what we call wow moments, whether it's, you know, questions and answers, whether it's something that I had the advantage. I was doing one on fire safety and fire science, so I had several things that went pop and several things that combusted, and that kind of keeps their attention. And the nice thing about that is they can all get a very close screen. They can all get a good view of what you're trying to do. Whereas if I was trying to do that live in a classroom, I've got to keep them a certain distance away to stay safe. Using the chat feature, much like we did here today, works very well as far as asking questions and getting answers. But again, it can be a little bit slow by the time they type in their answers to their chat. So again, yes or no questions, and I actually have the guys give me a thumbs up or give me a thumbs down, or what, you know, more voting kind of things. I see Sheila suggesting the polling questions. If you can build polling questions into a slide presentation, that's great. Both my presentations, I did not have any slides. It was all live demonstration, hands-on stuff. When the kids were in the classroom, they had the same kit I had. So I would do something, and then I would tell them, all right, play with it for a while, practice it, try it, see what you get. Actually mute myself for about 10 minutes and then come back and say, what'd you find? But the polling questions, if you're doing a slideshow like this, is a great way to keep them engaged, and then discuss the results of the poll. again, limiting the open-ended questions and the amount they have to type in the chat, it does keep them engaged, but it can be very slow as you read 15 or 30 different responses to your questions come in, and you're just sitting here reading. So just a couple of tips, you know, that for a couple of recent ones that I have done, and I thought I'd pass those along. So now we're running a little over 45 minutes here. Is there anything else that we have discussed? Is there anything anyone would like to share for the good of the group?
Hey Jeff, this is Tom Benisef from the
Yeah, hi Tom.
So we recently did a student competition day, which
Okay.
was a virtual event, and I'd like to share some lessons learned from it, kind of piggybacking on what you just talked about.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So, and I'm just going to take some key takeaways. It was a pretty successful event. The setup was, we provided backpacks with all the materials for like 5 or 6 different experiments, and this was part of Engineer Week, where the kids got backpacks full of these materials. We distributed those a week before, and then scheduled the event and sent it out. And one of the things we found that contributed to the success of the event was using a system familiar to the kids. For example, the school district here uses Zoom. So using Zoom, and it was a little bit of a learning curve for those that don't use Zoom, but having the kids familiar with the system, the same thing they're doing the virtual school with, you know, the past year in most cases, was a definite advantage.
That's a great tip. Yes.
Maximizing the use of breakout groups. So if you have a facilitator, or even better, a facilitator team, and you have different volunteers, making those breakout groups smaller so you can have the volunteers working with the kids definitely helped. Always it helps to do a rehearsal. And then this year we did a lot more focusing on the learning rather than the competition because of the challenges with a virtual environment. And then like you said, facilitator teams, maximum use of chat in those breakout groups.
So in the past with the competition, was there like a scoring rubric that you had, and you just kind of focused on results of what you learned or what the experiment showed, as opposed to trying to score teams? That's what you're trying to.
Yes, in the past it was a day where the kids attended in person. And for example, one of the events was they were given a set of materials, and you have to see how many marbles you can make a boat and see how many marbles you can float in a tub. And we would record, all the information, and we would list, who won and everything like that. Well, it's a little bit more difficult when you're not there with a judge in person to do. So we kind of scrapped the whole competition piece of it and focused more on, what they learned about buoyancy and other things.
Yeah, we have I have one I'm doing later this week. It's called the engineering design process, and I think I talked about this one of our first calls that we did, using paper towels and tin foil and drinking straws and popsicle sticks. The students get in small groups, and they have to design a rescue litter to carry the victim, which is a giant beanbag or potato, and carry it across the room. And we weigh them. They're judged on weight and how much material they used and how fast it assembles and disassembles and whatnot. And you can assign scores, and you can have a rubric to have a winner. But as you're saying, we tend to focus more on the pros and cons, what was good about this design, what was better about this other design. And then it'd be nice if we had a second round where they could all improve their designs, but in 45 minutes in a classroom, there just isn't. But if you're doing an all-day event or an evening thing, maybe some more. So what else, Tom? I keep interrupting you.
No, that was pretty much it.
I-
If you're out there and you're doing virtual events, you know, these are some of the best practices that we got from our most recent one, and we look forward to improving on that.
So yeah, I like getting the materials in their hands. When we did, when I did the one on light science, you know, we shipped all the materials out to the school ahead of time, and then I would explain the experiment and then literally just have to stop and give them time to do it. When I did my fire science one, we don't have materials in their hands. It's much more of a watch and see demo. But that worked really well with the kids all sitting at home because they could get a zoomed in camera view of the you know, only takes a spark to set off dryer lint kind of a thing and whatnot. Anyone else have anything to add for the good of the group? Thanks, Tom. Thanks so much. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be sending out a Survey Monkey. I'm going to send what I have ready now to the leadership team for them to kind of review and help me refine the questions. In the next week or two, hopefully you'll see the Survey Monkey. Please take some time and respond to it. We really do want your input. We really do want to make these calls worthwhile, and or if there's other things that we as a COI should be doing, other ways to support you, your post, your STEM efforts, or ideas that you have, we're definitely very interested in those. So look for that Survey Monkey coming out soon. In closing, we're always looking for articles for the TME for our STEM corner. We've got a good article coming out in the next issue, and if you want to do a presentation on something your post has done, or even something you've done through another organization for the good of the group here, and you know, do 10 or 15 minutes, that would be great. Would love to have more input and hear from everybody. And if just let me know, let Eddie know if you've got some ideas for either the article or for a future monthly call. And on that note, please be safe, get your vaccination, stay healthy, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Liza, for bringing in Chris. That was a great presentation.
Thank you for leading the call today, Jim.
Yeah, you may have noticed this is my first time advancing slides. I only messed up once, so
I thought it
I'm
went
learning.
great.
I'm learning.
There's a STEM career for you there.
Yeah, you would think for an electrical engineer I'd be a little better with technology, but you know, not so much. That's why I have kids.
There you go. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Have a good week, everybody. Bye.